Hello once again. It's a joy to be with you this evening, and we continue with our series on dating and relationships, and I'm sure you're excited to get this second session. Last time we introduced the dating and relationship tips for singles, and so we continue, we pick it from there, looking at the 10 red flags in a dating relationship. What do I mean here? The things you need to keep an eye on. Can I just remind us that love is not blind? If you're dating for marriage, because that's the reason we are talking about this, we would want as much as possible for you singles out there to engage in successful dating relationships that end in happy marriages. And that's why we are talking about this. Of course, we consider that we all desire or crave good relationships, healthy, reinforcing relationships that nourish our well-being. I have been telling different audiences that healthy relationships nourish our lives. They contribute 90% to our wellness. Okay, so if you have a good relationship with your spouse or with your partner, it is very, very nourishing. And so I'm just going to give you quick tips on this area, red flags, things you need to keep an eye on, reminding you if your love is blind, then it's not going to yield much. Love is not blind. You need to, if you're preparing for a successful marriage relationships, everything matters. I have been saying to different people, and let me say it again and emphasize it. Everything matters. There's no small issue. Remember, healthy relationships are about how we manage different issues and dynamics. And so everything matters. How you deal with each other, how you respond to situations, how you respond to each other, how you respect each other, it matters. So what I'm going to share with you are those red flags. Can I also, by way of introduction, tell you that by emphasizing these red flags, I'm not saying run for your dear life. I'm saying please beware that there is this. Don't be blind. Now, everything you see, from a therapy standpoint, we say any negative thing you see during dating, multiply it by 10 when you get married. Because why? When you're dating, we tend to pull out the best of ourselves and we rarely bring out the ugly. But should the ugly come out, just know that it may increase by a factor of 10 during marriage. So you have to ask yourself a question. If this thing multiplies by a factor of 10, will I manage? Or will I be able to support my partner overcome this? Support, not control, not direct them, but support them to overcome this. Another reminder is that we are all imperfect. So by sharing this, I'm not saying look for a perfect person. No, there's no perfect person, but there are certain basic things you need to keep an eye on, and you don't just throw in blind. And the reason I'm talking about this is that whenever I'm doing therapy, especially, I'll talk about some of the issues that you need to keep around. There are certain things you see during dating. And I ask people, did you see this? They say, yeah, I think so. You know, now when I go back, there are certain things I saw, but you know, I was in love, I ignored it. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is please don't be too in love to ignore certain things that matter. Keep an eye on them. If you have to make a decision now, either to continue with the relationship or not, it has to be now. Or to be aware that your spouse has this weakness, and then you'll see, you'll pray for them, you'll support them to overcome it. 3, you'll be able, you know, there are certain things we can put up with and help someone, but there are certain killer ones that you don't need to risk. So let me just go. I'm sure you're waiting to hear. 1, we're talking about red flags. red flags, things to keep an eye on, things not to ignore in a relationship. Number one, violence. I'm passionate about this because I'm sure you have been following events of people who are dying because of love, right? I ran a session on domestic violence. You'll check it out on our website. But please check if your spouse manifests areas of violence, you don't want to ignore that. Because I've been telling ladies and gentlemen that if you see violence during dating, if your partner beats you during dating, they'll kill you when you're married. And I say this with no apology because we have seen this and it's very painful. We have seen people battered, people crippled, disabled because of a spouse who is excessively jealousy or does not know how to manage anger, and so they beat them. And I hope when I talk about this, I know that we have cultural aspects around these, some communities which believe that somebody has to be beaten to believe that they are loved. I think we need to get over this. We need to have a mindset change. We need to really, really change our settings here and overcome some of these dangerous and useless stereotypes. So please keep an eye on violence. And I want to ask each one of us, please don't allow anyone to be violent towards you. Don't allow anyone to abuse you. Okay? It doesn't matter how you love each other. Please don't allow this. I'm emphasizing it because it's allowed. You know how violence occurs? Somebody threatens, then they realize you can take it, then they continue, then next time they slap you, next time they kick you. It moves in those series. So be careful to define your boundaries here and say no violence. Irrespective of the mistakes or whatever, I cannot take violence. Okay? And you need to be really assertive on that and not allow that, because if you do, then it can be bad. Don't be beaten during dating. Come on. Like you're beaten and then you continue in marriage, that's likely to multiply by a factor of 10. Number 2, you don't like your partner's friends. You see you're dating someone and you don't like their friends. I must tell you that we are all a product of the 5 people we hang out with, and I'm sure you have heard that. If you haven't, please note that we are all a product of the people we hang out with. If you check your spouse and you don't like their closest friends, you don't like their behaviors, and when I talk about this, I mean sometimes we are so jealous or we have our own issues towards relationships, but if it is genuine, you realize that they have certain character traits that you don't like. Please keep an eye on that, because most likely the person you're dating is just trying to act life and they are not being real, but in actual fact their behavior is not different from the 5 people closest to them. So just keep an eye on that and check how you manage it. Remember, I'm talking about management or making a decision to leave. That's also possible. But I'm not just saying run for your dear life. Just be wise enough, be discerning. Check their relationships, check their values. What's the value system of the people closest to your person? That's another red flag. Number 3, check their history of friendships. If the person you're dating has a disposable way of managing relationships, check the history. And by the way, by saying this, I'm not giving you a ticket to hide. We encourage you to share about your past relationships. Be honest and share. But when you share, check, does this person have a series of broken relationships? And that's not enough to abandon them or to, but check. Sometimes they have an excuse for every relationship. I haven't said reason. Now, yes, we can have reasons. Some reasons actually come off as just excuses. But why is this important? Because if the person, relationship management is a skill. And if somebody, the way they manage a relationship is abandonment. Abandon this 2 years, 1 year, 8 months, 5 relationships. Check, most likely yours won't survive as well. And so they will say, oh, finally I've gotten the person I wanted. But be careful. Again, I'm emphasizing wisdom. I'm not giving you a decision to leave or to do whatever you want to do, but just keep an eye on that. Don't ignore it and say, oh, poor woman, she had never gotten the love of her life. Or poor guy, these people who he's been relating with were not really good enough. Be very careful. Keep an eye on that. Follow up. Check, why do they abandon relationships? What is their history? Number 4, this is so important, and I have been speaking to so many singles. I hear this a lot. You have someone who takes breaks from the relationship. I hear you call it giving space. So let's give ourselves space. So you go for 3 months, then you come back. And so this person keeps zoning in and zoning out and zoning in and zoning out. Now this usually happens when there is a conflict. So there is a conflict. And I've heard some people say, this relationship should give me peace. So if it's not giving me peace, let me take a break. Then you take a break, then you zone in, then you zone out. Now be very careful with a person who manages a relationship that way. Giving space, let me tell you, life and relationships are about commitment. We commit to something, we move with it. If it doesn't work, then it hasn't worked or hasn't worked out. Just imagine you're going on a journey. You meet a roadblock and then you say, let me just drive back until they take the roadblock. No, you see policemen and then you say, I don't want to be inconvenienced. You just have to get there, solve that, get over that hurdle and keep going. If you have a person who zones out and zones in, just be careful, because when you're dating, you have that freedom to zone in and out. After you've gotten into marriage, a person who has that attitude of zoning in and zoning out, they are likely to continue with that behavior. That's why we have some people divorcing after 3 months, divorcing after 8 months, and they say, we are incompatible. Now, be very careful. That zoning in and out also comes off as a sign of immaturity. Because a mature person, maturity is measured in the way we solve problems. Life is about problem solving. It's about problem solving. So you can't just zone out of a problem and come in when it has settled. And I've talked to hurting people. Just imagine you're in and then you say, I think I need a break. But you're not thinking about the other person. I have been talking about the concept of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is about knowing your feelings, knowing the feelings of others, feeling for others, checking how, if you take this action, how it makes somebody else feel. I have talked to people who have been abandoned in this game of zoning in and out, taking a break, giving space, and somebody says, let's give space. But they don't consider the person they've abandoned, how they feel, the kind of insecurity, the confusion, the uncertainty. Now, be careful. Again, I said, anything you see now, please give it a factor of 10 and you will be able to project your marriage. You'll project it. I'm not saying there's no chance for growth and improvement, but be very careful that some of this adult life improvement takes really a slow pace, and most of the people don't survive the hurdles. So keep an eye on that person, taking a break, giving space. Let's not a sign of maturity which is required for such great relationships. Number 5, the person you're dating is married. Wow. I want to tell you singles out there, and I want to ask you, don't break a family to start one. Don't break a family to start one. Be careful if the person is married and they're trying to date you. And I know what I'm talking about because I've talked to so many people whose marriages have started that way. They broke a marriage and they say, oh, he wasn't having a good relationship, she was unhappy in a marriage. And most of the time you're the reason why that marriage is unhappy. Be careful. Be careful if you are the reason for the tears in that family and eventual breakup. If I beg you, singles out there, don't wreck a marriage to build your own. Do not. I want to tell you, and when I say this, I'm going to give you reasons, both spiritual and physical. Let me just begin with the physical. I've been emphasizing the importance of discernment and wisdom. Please be wise. A person who abandons 4 children, 3 children, a family, a wife and a husband, and you trust them, don't be naive. Don't be naive, I emphasize it, because life is in the long term. You're not going to settle in that sea of emotions of we feel this, I can't sleep. Just know that every relationship is a management platform. Before you know, you have management issues that this person ran away from in the previous relationship. And it's the same thing. I've been telling people that every time we run looking for a better person, we need to step back and better ourselves. So don't be naive. Single person out there, don't date a married woman. Don't date a married man. If they are married, they are married. And I want to tell you, let me just tell you, it's very interesting when I listen to the reasons why singles fall for married people. I hear some of them say, oh, you know, that person is more committed because they have a ring. I'm going to talk about a ring. That ring is not just a metal. It is a sign of commitment. And if somebody can't respect that commitment they made in a previous relationship, how can you trust them? How do you trust them? How can you just get in and you say, those are more committed? What do you mean commitment? And I'm going to run another relationship session on commitment because I know it's a big issue. And I'm also going to talk about it here. But be very careful. Now, I promised I'm going to talk about physical reasons why you shouldn't. Some of the reasons, normal reasons you shouldn't date a married person. One, that person, by the way, has issues with commitment. Some of them, we call them people on the run, right? They get into a relationship, they run it on an emotional thing. The first problem they get, they run to get a better person who is going to make them happy. I've been talking about how your relationship doesn't owe you happiness. You owe it happiness, right? It's what you put in that you get out. If you're starving it on investment, you can't expect benefits. So a person who can't commit to a relationship is always on the run. When they stop running, only heaven knows. Because just know that you're probably another candidate for abandonment. If you're dealing with a person who just abandons a family, most likely you'll be another abandoned family sooner or later. Don't be naive. Number 2, most likely you're dealing with a selfish person, right? I've told you, honestly, somebody who abandons a family of 2, 3, 4, 5 children and they start afresh, that's not a good sign of a person of character. So you have to be very, unless you're also not up to anything, you also don't care what kind of material you're running with, but I want to guarantee you that in most cases, you're running with a selfish person. Another reason you should be careful or keep an eye on this is most likely you're running with a player. A player doesn't commit. a player does hit and run. They are ever moving. Now, by saying this, I'm not, saying somebody, no, I know that marriages have problems, there are challenges, there are reasons why somebody has to leave a marriage. But be very careful if you're dating them when they are married. They haven't made a commitment to leave a marriage, to dissolve it, and then move on. And they are just double dealing. And then you be the reason why they abandon that. So most likely that person is a player and a very unserious person. The last one is most likely you're dealing with someone who has no values. Their value system is wanting. I think I labored to explain a personal value system, a standard of right and wrong. This person is always on the run. They don't care whether they abandon who. They don't care whether they, when they abandon a family, how they are perceived. They just don't care. Be very careful that you don't just throw yourself into the life of this person. So I hope this is really helpful. We'll continue looking at a set of other tips, but I hope honestly you benefit. I hope you really benefit from these red flags. Keep an eye on them. Remember, we are not bringing them up for you to run away. We are bringing them up for you to be better people and better married people later on. Thank you so much, and God bless you.